Rant and Fury here with another Ballistic Rants. This is the second part of the three-part series on Polish Cold War arms. This is going to be about the TT-33 version of the Tokarov that the Poles made. First, we need a little bit of historical context. Poland had been divided between various countries like Austria, Russia, for 123 years, and it didn't come back into existence until after World War I ended, 1918. And even with that, the Soviets renounced Russia's part of the peace treaty with Germany, so they thought, well, we're going to take Poland back, and plus it's going to be the crossroads for us to invade Europe and spread communism. So 1919, barely a year or so, not even a year after they gained independence, the Poles were fighting for their lives during the Polish-Soviet War, which lasted from 1919 to 1921. At one point, the Soviets was on the doorstep of Warsaw, the Polish capital, and they ended up somehow securing a victory which pushed the Russians back to the pre-War II borders. The Poles had inherited a rifle factory from the Germans whenever they took over Danzig, which became Gdansk, and it still is to this day, where they made various Mauser 98 models. One of the first ones was like the 98 AZ carbine, which was a handy short rifle, but it wasn't a standard 98 action. It took some liberties where not all the parts would interchange. And then they made the model 1895 Nagant gas seal revolver in its unusual cartridge. It's going to be one of the guns that I go over in the future, and I'll show you what's going on with that. So they make a version of it. Well, fast forward 1935, they came out with the Polish WZ-35 from Radom. It was based on a Colt Browning mechanical part. It looked like it had a decocker, but what it was, it retracted the firing pin to where you could rack the slide, put one in the chamber, push down on the lever, and it would retract the firing pin to where you could ease the hammer onto a loaded chamber and safely carry it. So essentially it was like a hammer block. The Radom factory did not receive a 3-letter production code, unlike anything that the Germans took over or in Germany proper as far as manufacturing goes. They did get a supervisor staff from Steyr, Daimler, and Puch, but getting ahead of themselves. Fast forward to 1939, the Poles are worried about the Russians on the Eastern Front. Now the Germans, especially the Goose-stepping kind, are on their western border, threatening to invade. And the Poles is like, well, maybe maybe we can only have to defend on one front because the Nazis and the Soviets don't get along worth a hoot. And, we can concentrate on one side at a time. Well, the Germans invaded, and the Poles found out pretty quick that the non-aggression pact that the Germans made with the Russians included the partition of Poland. So basically you had the wishbone from a Thanksgiving turkey. Germans was pulling one bone, Soviets on one side, and snapped it. And the Poles was just trying to buy time to get as much people and officials out to carry on a government in exile, which was set up in the UK. A lot of their fighter pilots and stuff went over to the UK as well. They fought during the Battle of Britain. Wonderful scene during that movie. But a bunch weren't so lucky. A lot of the aristocracy and officer class was captured by the Soviets. The Germans captured a bunch too, and they went to the camps, and a lot of them didn't make it. But the Russians was just as brutal, if not worse, because they wanted the Russians wanted the Poles as a resource for the oncoming war with the Nazis. The non-aggression pact was not going to last. They knew it. If the Germans didn't go back on it, the Soviets would. But they needed troops that was malleable, so they started executing the officers and aristocracy class in the Teutoburg Forest in their part of Poland. And instead of using the Tokarev or the Nagant revolver, they used the 32 ACP, which was commonly used by German military forces and police in an attempt to frame the Nazis. And at one point, after the Germans had went eastward and overtook that particular area, they found the grave and was like, looked at the International Red Cross. They was like, we do a lot of stuff, this wasn't us. But before the invasion of the Soviet Union by the Germans, the Russians had evacuated a bunch of the rank and file Polish army to re-educate them to be proper communists. A, they knew they was going to have to fight the Germans sooner or later. There was manpower they could use. B, whenever they took over Poland altogether, they would need a cadre to reform the military under a Soviet-based system. So, what happens next? 1944 rolls around. The Russians liberate Poland, and the Western Allies told Stalin at Yalta, you're going to have to let Poland decide whether it wants to be communist or free. And Stalin's like, yeah, well, I'll let them have free elections. He let them have free elections, but fingers crossed, he ended up rigging them pretty bad to where the communists won. Well, the Polish arms industry was pretty much destroyed at that point. The Soviets, whenever they took over most of Eastern Europe, sent technical advisors, spare machinery, and set up factories for making the Mosin Nagant rifle, the submachine guns that they used, and the TT-33 here. Now, let me readjust the camera here and I'll show you some of the stuff. Some of this may be continued again. Now, this is the retainer for the barrel pin. It's not like the rest of the Colt pistols. That's more or less keyed and sprung in from the other side, which is this one here. Now, this part is an added safety that the importers had to add before they could come into the United States. Unfortunately, so that's what's happening there. The TT-33 here was made from 1948 to 1955 by Poland. This is a 1952 model. Production numbers vary from 225,000 to 250,000, which is a lot of pistols, but not all of them went to Poland directly. Some of them went to fellow satellite states that were struggling to get rifle production up, which they eventually did, but they didn't have enough capacity to make sidearms to go with it. So these went to East Germany for a while, and eventually East Germany went with their version of the Makarov when the 9x18 round got adopted. These were found in Vietnam, Cuba, and a lot of the African conflicts that the Soviets were involved in. It's a very well made pistol, fit and finish. Rate 'em, doesn't slack as far as that goes. Chamber check. Everything's empty, which I done it earlier. The hammer's a little bit of an odd shape. And later on you'll see the internals that made it special compared to other pistols and why it's a little bit more of a pain in the butt to disassemble. Well, on to the next segment. Okay, disassembly goes. The little sliding retainer for the slide stop. A little bit of a bugger to do with your bare hands. I'm using a dowel to tap it to release it. Easier to push on than it is to push to take it off. So I'll move it back a little bit, push a little bit, and there goes the slide stop itself. Now, the same dowel, push in the barrel bushing here, and do a counterclockwise turn. That comes out like so. Now the slide comes loose, and the spring should come out fairly easy. The Tokarev has a lot like the 1911, a swinging barrel link. I know the 35 is about like the modern modern version of the Browning cam. They have just a one piece with a groove that's milled out at an angle that has the gun recoils. The barrel is moved by the action of the cut versus the slide stop. To come out, the barrel link goes forward on the Tokarev and comes forward through the slide like so. Gotta make sure the link's forward. So you've got barrel with a round recess that matches cuts in the barrel here, which locks the pistol up. Another part that makes the Tokarev unique is this right here. This is the hammer and lockwork part, which can be taken out and replaced to be serviced. If it's completely trashed, it's kind of like the SIG and Glocks using a chassis system to where the internals are the serial numbered part, and you can use different frames with the same internal, just switch it from one frame to the next to get around some of the gun prohibitions in some of the more draconian states. Now to go back together, the barrel goes back through the front like so, and the spring feeds from the back. Like that. Now it's ready to go back on the frame. One thing about having the frame horizontal is the lockwork likes to come loose and work its way back, so be extra careful with that. Now I'll pull back on the barrel a little bit and put the slide stop back into it. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a bugger, about like the Colt. Go ahead, put the retainer back on the barrel part. Now, next part, you push in on the plunger. Done this a few times. The spring is not that bad. Let me try it with my right hand and do the easy part with my left, which is putting the bushing back in. Alright, bushing's in, click it to the front like so. Test rack is fine. The magazines do have a slide stop, so it will lock back the action like so, and you drop it. Now, the added safety, which was added before anybody could import them into the United States because it only has a half cock. This is the safety on. This is the safety off. There's no magazine safety in the gun like some of the other Colt Browning designs. Here was the original safety, just a half cock. So, and maybe it's a good thing, but it looks a little bit odd. They had to shave a little bit off the plastic grip to make it work. Fit and finish on this is pretty good. I love the Polish pistols. Both of them I've got, and high quality bluing and what have you. It's just a well-made pistol. The round's not particularly suitable for self-defense, but it was a product of its time. Now let's go to the next segment where we actually go over a little bit about the ammunition itself. Okay, the cartridge on the left is a 7.62 by 25mm Tokarev. It used between 86 grain and 90 grain bullet versus the standard 9mm to the side. This one's actually 147 grain full metal jacket, so it weighs a third as much as the, or third as much more than the Tokarev round. Now, the Poles also made a version of the PPS Sudarev submachine gun, the PPS 43, which was the folding stock stick mag gun that was originally pioneered during the siege of Leningrad. It was all sheet metal construction, though later on they did the 4354, I believe, which had a wooden buttstock instead of the folding metal stock. It used the Tokarev cartridge around as well. Now, interesting fact about the Tokarev cartridge, a lot of it, including this batch here, which is 1950s Polish surplus, had a steel jacket, and it would pierce soft body armor that didn't have a strike plate. Let's see, here we go. Yep. Versus lead core, it ain't moving one bit. Now, the round can still be found cheap as far as surplus supplies go, though that's drying up. I got this particular pistol back in 2009 or before, with a case of ammo to go with it from Century Arms. It's one of those cartridges I don't reload for because I got so many of them. If the ammo ever goes to the bad, I'll just eventually buy dies and pull the ammo for the tips and just use new powder to go from there. The Tokarev is not a good round for self-defense because it's got a light bullet. You can't find soft points or hollow points that easy. I think Privy makes a few, and Hornady makes a few 30 grain, about 100 and some grain, 30 caliber, 100 grain bullet. That may work, it may not. These pistols, like I said, was well finished. One difference between some of the communist countries was the insignia on the grips changed a bit. I think the Romanians had a different symbol. The Yugoslavs adopted a Tokarev variant, the Model 57, but it had a longer grip to where it would hold 9 rounds instead of the 8 that's in this single stack. And another point of view of it, the lanyard ring. That was a device to where you could clip on a cordage that went around your belt. Some of the inexperienced officers put it around their neck, but in close quarters, some of them would get choked out with it. That's why most of the experienced officers looped it around the belt of their uniform before clipping it to the pistol itself. Also, the magazines. Let's see. Have a lanyard loop which To me, that's a little bit redundant, and plus, the magazine's a thin piece of sheet metal for the most part with a cap over it. Not the best place to be trying to secure your weapon with. But the recoil on this gun is not bad at all because it's a lightweight projectile. The main noticeable feature of it is the amount of noise and blast it makes. It's almost like a .32 Magnum revolver as far as the amount of racket it makes. I don't have one. I've been around a couple here and there. The Poles kept these pistols in inventory even after they switched over to the Model 64s. 64s happened to be a little bit handier, and plus the cartridge was current Warsaw packed spec. So, but like everything else, you don't let good surplus go to waste unless you have to. Keep some in stock and supply the rest of your buddies that are fighting the evil pig dog capitalists. Well, folks, hope I didn't bore you too much. I've got going to edit these 3 sections together. I did not want to bore you with singing or some sort of gimmick this week like I did in previous weeks. So, have a good evening and take